Game week 36 is here, so it's time to finalize those FPL teams. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan. We have just 3 game weeks left this season, so we're in do or die territory. We're going to make sure we ace every single transfer and captaincy decision for the rest of the season now. So guys, as you may know, it's not been the best season for me as a slightly more maverick FPL manager, trying to go off the template a little bit, but sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, and actually in game week 35 it kind of did. Going for Bowen as my captain actually did end up paying off a little bit, as well as going for Konsa ahead of the likes of Arsenal defenders like Saliba. So actually not a bad score in 56 points for game week 35 in what was a pretty low scoring week generally. However, it is too little too late for my season, but I think I just have to keep pushing through. I'm around 60 points outside the top 100k now. It is a lot, but I think with the right differentials, with the right aggressive approach, there is still a chance, a small chance, but still a chance we may be able to get across the line. But at this stage, you know, if you are in a situation like me where you're not happy with your season, you're not happy with your rank, you gotta just have to try and do something, because what's the worst that can happen really at this point? You go from having a bad rank to a bad rank. Hey, what's the difference, man? Let's try and do something different. Let's try and keep up the slightly differential picks to see if we can capitalize and try and find those marginal differences on the rest of the crowd. And by the way, guys, if you do want to show a bit of support for my terrible season, feel free to do so by leaving a like. It is massively appreciated, but hopefully the rest of my videos have been helping you guys out throughout the season. Let's get on with my game week 36 team. So it is time to be a little bit bold again. I've been bold for the past couple of months, and maybe it hasn't paid off, but you know, I do feel like on another situation on another day, maybe some of my picks have been a little unlucky. I don't really want to sit here and make excuses, but I need to keep going. I need to keep just trying to do something a little bit different. I think that's what I have to do here. So we're going to start off with that exact kind of ideology in mind by going for Areola as the goalkeeper for this week up against Manchester United, who do have their full focus on the Europa League right now. And honestly, guys, if you are happy with your rank, if you are content, I think I would be more kind of willing to play the likes of Raya and the Arsenal defenders. But for me, I've got to try something different here. So I'm going to try out going for, you know, Areola against Manchester United instead of Raya versus Liverpool. I know it's not the perfect goalkeeper pick this week, but I do think that generally what we see with Arsenal is they don't concede too many shots, but they do concede goals. And therefore, even if both of these two teams were to concede goals, and for the record, I think that's pretty likely to happen, I'm going to bank on hopefully Areola being able to clock up a couple of save points. And if he does somehow keep a clean sheet, and the likes of Raya and maybe some of the other popular goalkeepers don't pick up a clean sheet, this is going to be a position where I can make up some difference of points without too much risk here, really. I don't think this is a high risk kind of differential goalkeeper play, but that's kind of what I'm feeling that I'm going to have to do right now. But again, if you are in a good position right now, you just play Raya. You just play it safe. You go with the crowd on this one. Moving on into my defense, we've got GW36, who is probably my standout defender for this game week. He's obviously been brilliant and now has a fixture against Southampton. There are some Man City players coming back from injury now, which could potentially move GW36 to the left-back position where he really does thrive. But even at centre-back, he's picking up bonus points really well because the wing-backs for Man City are typically players listed as midfielders within the game of FPL, and therefore it's only GW36, Ruben Dias and Ederson actually really eligible for bonus points after clean sheets, which is really useful for these guys. So GW36, really nice pick for this week. Happy to have him. The other defenders, maybe not as happy, and I need to figure out, is it worth making transfers here? So next up, we've got Daniel Munoz. Now, he has been very good. Maybe unfortunate not to get a return in that Forest game, who actually didn't produce too much against the likes of Crystal Palace. However, this is a good game against Spurs, not necessarily for defenders. We could see a rotated Spurs team actually allow Crystal Palace to maybe have a better chance of a clean sheet. However, I'm looking for attacking returns, and any player who plays on the counter-attack against Spurs is always going to be in for potential attacking returns. And Daniel Munoz, despite being listed as a defender, we see time and time again his real position is more like a right winger in the actual games of football that we watch. So we're looking for attacking returns. We're looking for those big hauls from him. That is definitely always going to be a possibility with Daniel Munoz. And finally, we're going to go for Konsa. Again, I could go for Saliba this week against Liverpool, but I'm going to instead choose to go for Aston Villa defence here with Konsa, who actually have been defending pretty well recently. Bournemouth, maybe not the free-scoring team that we saw a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more. But now, with Aston Villa, with so much to play for, all to play for in the Premier League, I'm hoping for them to keep it tight at the back and maybe look for those clean sheets. But anyway, I want to have a look at the clean sheet probabilities for this week and the projected clean sheets for Game Week 36. This comes in from Rob T over on Twitter. And we do see that actually out of my defence, it's really only Man City with a really decent chance of a clean sheet. Them and Nottingham Forest look like the best clean sheet potential teams of any team in the Premier League going into this new game week. So therefore, I am going to have to get a little bit fortunate or get some attacking returns from the other defenders in order to make up some ground here. But what I find really interesting when having a look at this is actually the likes of Arsenal and Arsenal defenders only have a 19% chance of a clean sheet. So if I want to bet against the crowd who will be heavily invested in the Arsenal defence, we're kind of looking at Aston Villa, who are also on 19% chance of a clean sheet. We are looking at, obviously, Crystal Palace with Munoz, also 19% chance of a clean sheet. And then if we look at West Ham against Manchester United versus Raya against Liverpool, it is Raya 19% chance of a clean sheet versus West Ham 18% chance of a clean sheet. So just 1% difference there. And also you would say that Areola has a higher chance of getting save points. And then you add in the fact that, of course, I'm trying to bet against the crowd here a little bit. The difference is kind of marginal here. So I need to kind of look for that swing, hope for that swing. It could go either way. Raya could outscore, Saliba could outscore. That could definitely happen, and I will find myself down more points. However, it could go either way, and you kind of have to take these opportunities where it could go either way. And particularly when you're in a situation like me, I think this is the way I want to play it in this game week. Obviously, I'm looking forward to next season and trying to play a little bit more conservatively. But right now, I've got 3 game weeks left. I've got to really close out this season. I can't just give up. I can't just accept my loss. I really want to try and do something here and hopefully can inspire some of you guys who are also not happy with your rank to do something similar. And this is one of the ways I am going to try and do that, by benching those Arsenal defenders for other defensive alternatives in my squad that actually are not really that much difference in terms of those probabilities when we're looking for clean sheets. So overall, this is what my defense will look like. It's not perfect for Game Week 36, granted. We do have some better fixtures coming up for my defence and on the bench as well, my bench defenders. So I think we can cover future game weeks. It's just this game week that maybe looks a little rough for me. Is it worth making a transfer here? Maybe. But all in all, I do see that the forwards and midfielders are going to have those bigger swings, those higher upsides that I am going to depend on to make up ground. So I'm not really interested in making transfers in my defense right now, because I just feel like that the valuable few transfers we have left will be better spent on higher upside picks further up the pitch. So that's kind of the plan there. But let's move on into midfield anyway. We've got Mo Salah still in the team at the moment, Arsenal at home, and he genuinely could be an opportunity to sell and bet against the crowd there. That is definitely something I am potentially looking at. Of course, once again, if you're happy with where you are right now or you're doing pretty well, Salah is not a player you are going to sell. On the other side of this, we know Salah is a penalty taker, so there's always going to be penalties that could really skew his points upwards, which is very nice for Salah owners. We also see that maybe the ball may be forced to Salah a bit more than usual right now, because Salah is probably looking to push up his own personal records, despite Liverpool as a team not really having too much to play for now. So Salah's an interesting one. He's a player I could bet against. Not sure I want to do that or not. Brian Mbeumo next in the team is a player I'm much more confident in. Ipswich away, picked him up last week, only got the 5 points, but still, we bought Mbeumo in for multiple game weeks, and Ipswich is obviously a very nice fixture for him. him. Hopefully he can pick up some scores, because actually over the past 5 times he's played newly promoted teams, on 4 of those occasions he has scored 14 points or more, which is really, really significant. But he is going to be a really template player for this week, so maybe I have to look elsewhere for captain. Or maybe we just play it safe for captaincy this week and look to make the difference up in terms of captain in future game weeks, because what I don't want to do is captain a player who I'm actually not that confident in. But another player I'm feeling pretty good about is Jarrod Bowen. Yet another goal, and yet another FPL return in game week 35. And he has been so consistent recently. Up against Manchester United, who aren't a particularly strong team in the Premier League, don't really care about the Premier League. You have to think there's going to be opportunities here. So Bowen, I'm really liking as a set and forget midfield option for the rest of the season for me. Quite like the look of that. Ismaila Sarr is next, and I think a few people will turn their noses up on Ismaila Sarr, and I understand why. He has been blanking in a lot of games recently, but actually I think this kind of fixture does favour a player like Ismaila Sarr playing on the counter-attack against a Spurs high line who concedes so many chances from these kind of situations. I think Sarr could actually get some joy here. And what is interesting about Sarr here as well is that his data is actually on a bit of an uptick at the moment. Had a really good chance against Arsenal, unfortunate not to get a return there, but also against Forest, he clocked up 1.01 expected goal involvements with 0.6 xg and 0.41 xa. That is really, really good, and really, I get really even more unfortunate. Probably one of the most unfortunate players of game week 35. Pretty much sums up my season at this point. I can't lie to you guys, but a player who is doing well for data and plays a fixture that looks like a good tactical matchup, I'm struggling to see a strong reason to sell him unless he is one of your few only options to sell in order to get another midfielder that you perhaps would really like in your team. So for me, I think a lot of people will sell him. I think he is still fairly differential. I don't think he will be super high owned, or even if he is, he will be benched by a lot of people in game week 36. So looking for difference makers, Ismaila Sarr has a lot of potential here and has that ability to pop off and get one of those mega scores that we've seen previously from him in the season. He's very much an all or nothing kind of player, and that might be exactly what I'm looking for. It's not going to be for everyone, don't get me wrong, but we've got to play our own games of FPL, and I think this one suits my game. And finally, in midfield, we do have Savinho, which is a really, really curious one. If Savinho does indeed start against Southampton, well, he's going to play as a right-sided attacker, and right-sided attackers always thrive against Southampton. It really is quite crazy how many of these right-sided attackers do well against Southampton. So last week, for example, we saw the likes of Ayew score for Fulham, Wilson for West Ham, it was Bowen for Aston Villa, it was Marlon for against Spurs, it was Brennan Johnson. It's every time, guys. Every time Southampton line up against a team, the right winger of that team will score against them. So if that is Savinho, that's great. I'm a little bit concerned as whether Savinho will actually start, though. I think it is probably more likely he will than won't. I think we're going to probably see a front lineup of Savinho on the right, Marmoush on the left, because Marmoush did do so poorly on the right last game week. And then obviously De Bruyne in that slightly behind role, false nine, if you want to call it that, creative role in that Man City team. And as such, if Savinho does start, I actually think he's, again, a pretty good, nice differential pick for this game week, using a kind of strategy of targeting that Southampton left-hand side that seems to be working pretty much every single game week. So, therefore, if Savinho plays, I will be looking to keep him in my team. However, if he is benched, if we get some early team news, or if we get no early team news whatsoever on Man City, then I probably won't want to take that risk and would be looking to make a transfer move here. But we'll come back to that one. Let's look at the midfield numbers here. This comes in from Fantasy Football Hub and their Opta Stats tool. This is from game week 30 to 35, and we're looking actually at midfielders ordered by expected goal involvements per 90. And we can see Mbeumo, Salah, and Bowen all make this kind of top echelons of these players, top 10 of these midfielders for expected goal involvements, which is very nice indeed, all with 0.6 expected goal involvements per game, which is very nice. Obviously, there are some other players higher up the list, such as Asensio, who has had his numbers inflated by penalties, Luis Diaz, who is no longer guaranteed minutes and plays against Arsenal. We've got Jacob Murphy, poor fixtures, Ezra. Wish I had him instead of Sarr, but hey, just another swing that is in the past now, I hope. And Tell here, who again is not super nailed on, I don't think. And, you know, Spurs, we're not expecting too much from them. So actually, when you discount a lot of these players, actually, Mbeumo, Salah, Bowen don't actually look so bad right now. They actually look like some of the better picks in FPL right now for your midfield position. But I've got a 5-man midfield, and the likes of Sarr and Savinho do not appear on this list. So certainly, even though I like their tactical matchups this week, I understand why a lot of people might feel inclined to sell them. Let's move up to my forward positions anyway. And we have a 2-man strike force of Isak and Marmoush currently. We have Mateta on the bench, and the reason Mateta is on the bench is because he's not such a counter-attacking player, and I also feel like he is more susceptible to early substitutions compared to maybe an Ismail Assar in this Crystal Palace team. And I'm a little bit worried about the beginnings of some rotation going into Game Week 36 ahead of that FA Cup final, which will take place at the same time as many of the Game Week 37 fixtures. But we've got Isak here against Chelsea. I'm actually not super convinced by Isak at the moment. The one thing I like about him is his minutes are probably very, very secure with Newcastle, with still so much to play for, looking for Champions League place. I guess the other thing I like about him is he's on penalties, and that's always useful in the game of FPL. But outside of that, really, his penalty in Game Week 35 maybe covered up the fact that he had a pretty weak game, not really a sniff at goal, and his form generally hasn't really been where we hope it would be. So Isak with not great form and some difficult fixtures. Chelsea putting up some of the best defensive numbers in the Premier League at the moment. That's their underlying numbers. But also Chelsea have actually only conceded 5 goals in the past 8 games. No matter how you look at Chelsea right now, and maybe they're not the best attack at the moment, but certainly from a defensive point of view, they're actually doing really well. So I don't love that fixture for Isak. Arsenal after that, we know Arsenal are a top defence, maybe with a little bit of time after their disappointment in the Champions League, full focus can go back on the Premier League and they can become that top defence once more. And then Everton, of course, is always a tricky fixture if you're an attacker as well. So if we're looking at Isak not really getting a sniff last game week and are only relying on a penalty, can we rely on penalties in the next 3 game weeks alone to see him through? I wonder if there is some options to, again, bet against the crowd, because the majority of FPL managers will see the 9-pointer from Alexander Isak in Game Week 35 and just assume that he's playing well right now, because honestly, he's not really, and it's a difficult run of fixtures for Newcastle generally. Again, is this an opportunity to bet against the crowd? 80-90% of people will have Isak in their team. If you want to be one of the few without Isak, you could score a lot of points. If Isak scores 2 points and your Isak replacement scores many more points, 9 points, maybe against a brace, we're looking at like 13 points for a forward, then this starts to look really good. And we can try and, target some of those potential swings we could see by going against the crowd here for a player who the crowd will keep, despite actually maybe not being the perfect FPL asset here. But anyway, one more forward, and that is Marmoush. Ipswich away from home. I'm pretty confident about Marmoush's, Southampton away. I'm actually pretty confident about the fact of Marmoush starting in this game. I do think he is in danger of an early substitute in this Southampton game. So for that reason, I'm not 100% convinced on him maybe as a captain option. But still, if he plays again on more of a left-sided role, or more central, just not on the right, basically, then this game against Southampton could be pretty decent for him because he is, again, a forward putting up really good underlying numbers. I want to throw that on screen for you guys, by the way. This time we're looking at non-penalty expected goals per 90. Of course, you do have to factor in penalties into your decision-making, but just to get an idea of who is doing well right now or who is getting opportunities in open play. And actually, I've highlighted here the 3 template forwards of maybe Game Week 35, which is going to be Isak, Marmoush and Mateta. And I've also highlighted the 3 forwards who are probably the biggest forward targets ahead of game week 36, which are Wissa, Cunha, and Wood. So, looking through these players, we actually see Marmoush is top of the pile here among those players who we're talking about. Best underlying numbers, and if he can start this game, which I believe he will, then that is going to be very, very useful for this game against Southampton. Could be looking at a big scoreline here, but maybe some risk about early subs and what have you. After that, we have Isak here, 0.49 expected goals, but maybe underperforming a little bit on his actual output. Over the last few weeks. It's a long season. Isak obviously has some fitness issues. You wonder if he is starting to tail off a little bit, but the data here is actually not too bad. It's just the fixtures we're more worried about and the form. After that, we have the likes of Wissa and Cunha, who for non-penalty expected goals are actually fairly tight here to Isak. Wissa is 0.47 XG per 90, Cunha 0.39 XG per 90. So not too much to split these guys. And with Wissa and Cunha in significantly better form and with significantly better fixtures, you do have to wonder whether these guys would make adequate replacements. But let's take a look further down the list. We see Mateta and Wood. Mateta is putting up poor numbers right now and is going to become rotation risk very, very soon. So he's definitely a player that you guys should be thinking about replacing, no matter whether you are trying to play template, trying to play differential, no matter your situation, you're going to have a think about this one. And Chris Wood is interesting, probably has the best fixture of a lot of these forwards with this game against Leicester. However, the data is still poor from him, and actually his output is not really, he's not overperforming in the same way as he was earlier on in the season. Most of the season, he has been putting up poor data and, through form, through whatever, has been scoring regardless. That's not really happening at the moment. So you do wonder if this is a return to normality, a regression to mean in Chris Wood right now. With Forest, despite their good fixtures, actually not playing very well at the moment generally. So my confidence in Forest is maybe not as high as it once was. To be fair, I've been kind of in many ways, in FPL terms, preying on their downfall as a stats-based FPL manager, because I just didn't think this was sustainable. But it seems like, yeah, we are seeing that finally no longer being sustainable. For me in my FPL season, it is too little too late. But at the same time, I don't think I'll be looking to go for Wood when we do see the likes of Wissa and Cunha with arguably just as good fixtures, but with great form and also great underlying data. Cunha, penalty taker as well. That could be useful for sure. Some of those set pieces as well. Could be pretty nice here, actually. So this is what my team looks like at this present moment. We've got the bench here. Like I mentioned, we're going to be benching those Arsenal defensive assets. Raya and Saliba on the bench. Mateta, I mentioned, was on the bench as well because I'm a little bit more concerned about his minutes and also the tactical matchup between Mateta and Spurs. I think more favours the wingers rather than the striker. And we've got Dan Burn here, who, in fairness, I could see potentially keeping a clean sheet against Chelsea with that home fixture. But all in all, I do think I prefer Konsa for a clean sheet this week. And I prefer Munoz for his attacking returns this week as well. Obviously, Gavardio is going to play. So let's think about some transfers. So there's two ways this can go, really, for me. I think with the likes of Savinho, if I get a leak that he is starting, Man City, first game of Game Week 36, good chance we do get a leak there. If we do, then actually Savinho is quite nice, and I'd probably like to keep him as a differential. However, if he is not starting, I am looking at a potential double switch for Game Week 36 involving taking a -4. Yeah, we're last ditch at this point. We've got to throw some hits around. It's got to be done. So if Savinho is starting, I will probably keep him, and I'll probably look to replace Mateta and replace him with Wissa or Cunha. Probably Wissa is more sensible to go for. But I think that would involve maybe benching Isak for this week and maybe looking to play Isak in future weeks. But if Savinho isn't starting, or if we don't get any news at all, we're going to have to take a -4 here, I think. And that -4 will be for this guy's on screen. It's going to be, well, first of all, Isak down to Wissa to free up some money and then upgrade Savinho up to De Bruyne. So this looks pretty nice for me. I could also potentially go for Cunha instead of Wissa. don't think I'm really looking at Wood right now, but I really do like the look of Wissa at the moment. He's just in red hot form at the moment, and you know it could be a big score against Ipswich if everything goes to plan. De Bruyne also represents a really nice captain option for me if I do want to go a bit different to the template and Burmo. So if I do bring in De Bruyne into my team, I will be looking to captain him against Southampton, and the vice captain will instead be on Brian and Burmo. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but we're in crazy territory. For most people, I would just recommend play it safe with Mbermo, and if I don't bring in De Bruyne, I probably will captain Mbermo myself, because De Bruyne is probably the only player I see, if he is starting, he's probably the only player I see as a genuine player who could maybe match someone like Mbermo. I'm not really looking elsewhere here. Maybe Wissa potentially, but Mbermo just has that higher upside as a midfielder, and that's kind of what I need right now. So yeah, you got to play, again, you got to play that your own game. You got to look at what's in front of you, your own situation, and what will and won't work for you. And I think it's going to have to be a midfielder for captaincy for me this week. So this is what my team could potentially look like for game week 36. Fantasy Football Hub gives it a game week rating of 91%, which is understandable given the risks involved, but maybe that -4 might just help carry me through to the end of the season, with De Bruyne hopefully playing the remainder of his few games in a Man City shirt during the rest of the season. I think actually it doesn't look too bad for the rest of the season. I'm not really sure who I'm going to captain in game week 37. But yeah, going into game week 37, 38, we'd maybe look at moving Mateta to Acuna at that point. I do still really want Cunha in my team. So maybe we'll do something like that, which will allow us to bench Ismaila Sarr. Of course, if I could find a good Sarr replacement, maybe I'd do that. But generally speaking, I think this is kind of what I would be looking to do with my FPL team now for the remainder of the season. And we're going to game week 38 with hopefully a pretty strong team, actually. Should look pretty good. So because we can play our double Arsenal defense here, and we'll bench all of our Crystal Palace boys there. Burn will probably come on here as well. And yeah, maybe we'll look something like this for game week 38. Maybe we'll make one last-ditch transfer. Maybe bring in a Saka to captain against Southampton in game week 38, something like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. So, yeah, there we go. Rough plan for the end of the season. The big important thing is, though, I've got to try and do something, right? You know, I can't just give up at this stage of the season. You know, obviously I want next season to start, but let's play what's in front of us. Let's just try our best here. And hopefully maybe some of you guys who are also struggling can get some kind of inspiration to, you know, the way I'm trying to navigate this tough situation that I have unfortunately found myself in. But if you did enjoy this video, make sure you do drop a like. Do subscribe if you're new around here. Check out yesterday's video. We did 100 experts and there's some really good stuff in there. So go have a look at that one. And there might be an upload tomorrow. I'm not sure. I'll let you guys know. But for now, I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.